This is News 12 Law Call.
Hi there, and welcome to our special Love and the Law program. We tend to pull this program out when we're surrounded by holidays such as Mother's Day, Valentine's Day. Very important to make sure that spouses get along, and if not, what are some options that you have? We're very pleased to welcome into the Law Call program for the very first time family law attorney Holly Chapman and also Reed Sanders from the Hawk Law Group. And how are both of you?
Doing real well, Neil. How are you?
Fantastic, and welcome, Holly, to you. We understand your office is in downtown Augusta.
That's right. It is on Laney Walker.
Fantastic.
Well, I've known Holly for a little while. We came in close to the same time, so
right.
I can tell you she's a very good attorney, and I know they practice criminal law as well as personal injury and family law, and she has tons of trial experience. She's a great trial attorney. I believe aren't you still the president of the Augusta Criminal Defense Lawyers Association?
I am, yes.
So, and I do not know a whole lot about family law, so she's the expert on it, and she's going to help us get through this Love and the Law episode.
Hey, Reed, here's what we do know. We are both happily married, of course, right? And we also know that it's cheaper to keep her, right?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, my father-in-law may disagree with that, but for the most part, I agree.
Well, Holly, we like to have a little fun. Of course, it's a very serious topic when you have spouses that come into your office. And just to kick things off, since we're about a year into the pandemic, just out of curiosity, have you noticed an uptick at all, or have you noticed that people are coming together a little bit more during this odd time?
Well, I actually think that for the most part, it seems like divorces have followed the same pattern they always do. They kind of ebb and flow seemingly around, the beginning of the year, sometimes right after the holidays. I guess maybe people give it a last go, and then in the new year, they realize that it's time to part ways. So I haven't seen things change dramatically on that front, but there have been, I feel like, a lot of child custody issues in the pandemic that are novel because of the issues that we're facing now.
Yeah, and actually, that's the subject of our first question from Melanie. She wants to know, Holly, what if there's a custody arrangement, but during this pandemic, one parent takes social distancing very seriously, and the other encourages the kids to sort of ignore it? Is there anything that can be done so that the first parent can maybe stop doing that?
I think that's such a complicated issue. I mean, it's one that I'm seeing a lot, that the courts are seeing a lot. Just in your daily life, you can see when you go around with friends and family, everybody has a different opinion about what their level of comfort is. And when you're dealing with children, if you're the primary custodian, or if you maybe have a immunodeficiency or something like that makes you extra cautious, it's possible that your former spouse is just not in that situation. They don't have the children all the time. Maybe they just want to get out and blow off steam, go to possibly indoor restaurants and places that some people do not feel comfortable going. While I don't know if there's an easy answer to it, the primary custodian in theory does have final decision-making authority, but usually when a child is in one parent's custody, that parent gets to decide day-to-day things, like where are they going and what are they doing. I have
Holly,
but
as far as personal injury and most of the majority and premise liability, that kind of thing with civil work right now, it's very difficult to have a trial, get a hearing. Is that the same for family law? If in this situation, for example, if somebody is worried, how do you get a hearing, or what do you do?
Family law, I mean, the courts are still open. Family law has still been trucking along. So, criminal trials are stopped, personal injury, a lot of civil trials, those are stopped as well. But because family law is just in front of a judge, generally speaking, you are able to get a hearing.
And Holly, another situation has occurred to Michelle, who said that her ex-husband lost his job, had to move in with a few friends, so that when he has custody of the kids, their children together are sleeping at someone else's home. Does Michelle have a say in this arrangement because she doesn't even know who her ex is kind of hanging out with?
I think to some extent that would depend on what the parenting plan and the settlement agreement, if that's what they have, says. There are some agreements that state, if someone can live in a house with someone else. Usually it's more frequently in a romantic relationship. Can you have a romantic partner stay over while the children are there? But even in a case like this, I mean, if the children didn't have a bed to sleep in, or if they were sharing a room with someone they were concerned about, then that might be a reason to go back to court. But if they don't have any particular reason to believe that there's something wrong with those other individuals, then the court may or may not determine that that's a problem.
And that's, one reason why it's good to have a good trial attorney like Holly when you're doing these, if you're going through a divorce, and even if it's amicable where both sides are pretty agreeable to the situation, life changes, things changes. So any kind of family law is kind of like a contract. So you can put in there what you want and what you don't want. So, and Holly can, with her experience, can help you say, all right, well, down the road, this may become an issue. We might want to address it now. And so some of these questions won't come up if you have a good trial attorney like her to start the case for you.
And Holly, another situation related to the rights of the spouses has come up with Kevin. And Kevin's ex-wife has primary custody of the two kids, but she wants to move in with her mom, but it's not in Georgia or South Carolina. It's in another state, which of course is going to sort of interfere with visitation options. Does Kevin have a say in this? Again, he does not have primary custody.
So again, there are divorce decrees and settlement agreements that address this, but assuming that his does not, the courts don't keep people from moving. So the primary custodian can move with the children to another state, but the courts may look on that as a material change in circumstance to readdress what custody and visitation should look like.
Well, on the other side of the break, we're going to look at how criminal activity can affect child custody, and also what you put on Facebook can also play a role as well. Please stick around. You're watching the Love and Law edition of News 12 Law Call.
Welcome back to News 12 Law Call with award-winning broadcaster Neil Gordon. And from the Hawk Law Group, attorney Vic Hawk, with more than 30 years experience and millions of dollars awarded to his clients. Attorney Reed Sanders, born and raised in Thompson and known for his strong courtroom skills. With criminal law, former police officer, now lawyer Sean Merzlach. And with South Carolina injury law, trial attorney Chase Hawk. Plus guest attorneys from across the CSRA. Your rights, your calls, live. News 12 Law Call.
Well, good Sunday evening. Our topic, love and the law. Pretty timely, I would say. Hope your day went smooth with your spouse. I'm Neil Gordon. Pleased to welcome back into the program the happily married Reed Sanders.
That's right. Very happily. Very happily.
Hi, Kate. Hope you are well. And also family practice attorney Holly Chapman. And Holly, how are you? First segment seemed to go really well. You did great.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm enjoying it.
Oh, good. Happy to have you. And we have some email questions, and then we'll continue with some comments from Reed as well. The next question comes from Stacy, who's been a stay-at-home mom for the last 12 years. Her husband wants a divorce, and she's not sure what job she'll be able to get to pay all the bills. So how will it be decided how much child support she may receive?
Well, the child support question is pretty easy. For the most part, there's a calculator that pretty much anyone can access online that the courts use. They put in salary of each party and the cost of insurance and things like that. And from there, they determine how much money the primary custodian is due. In her situation, it sounds like she might be in a position where she could also be asking for spousal support to help her get back on her feet, since she did stay home with the children while her husband worked during those 12 years. So child support is pretty straightforward. Spousal support is less so. That would be determined by the court based on need and the ability of the other party to pay.
And that's considered alimony, is that right?
Yes, it's another word for alimony.
And how have the courts ruled over time, I guess, as it relates to that?
I think that alimony has become less favored over time, but we are in a position now where they are much more likely to give alimony for a set period of time, not just until you get married again or until, the end of time, but for the next 3 years or for the next 2 years, you can have this amount of money per month to help you. And during that time, you can find a job and work up so that you can pay your own bills with the help of child support, or you can go to school and maybe improve your situation so that you can get a better paying job.
Mm-hmm. And I get a lot of calls, Holly, about the finances of the partner that is supposed to pay the spousal support changing. If that happens, how does that work? Do you go back in front of the judge and address that, or is it just a contract that stays throughout?
So you do have the option, if you've had a material change in your financial situation, to go back and readdress child support. Generally speaking, unless there's been a large change, like a loss of a job that's through no fault of a person who lost the job,
right,
you can go back at that time. Otherwise, maybe every 2 years would be
okay.
A minimum.
I know social media is just everywhere these days, and Reed, I know it crosses over into personal injury and criminal and such,
yeah.
and so you may want to chime in on this, but Alexa wants to know if she's able to use pictures of her ex-husband on Facebook to sort of prove her case in child custody. And I'm just wondering, Reed, do you scrub people's Facebook pages to help you in the case?
Yeah, and we've had cases that even one that comes to mind is we had a personal injury case where a nice lady had a knee injury, and she was toughening it out and couldn't get it fixed, so to speak. And so a couple months go by and she goes to the doctor and they say, well, yeah, you got a torn ligament in your knee. And the accident was, well, how do we know this happened from the accident? It's been 2-3 months. And so on Facebook, she had a picture of her sitting on a dock and had a big bruise on her knee 2 or 3 days after the accident. So it can help you. And I've had cases where it absolutely hurts you, where somebody's telling me that they're injured and then on Facebook they're dancing and partying or whatever. So everybody needs to be very careful with their social media for sure.
And Holly, have you ever, I guess, encountered a case where you've noticed some photos on Facebook and like Reed says, can it help and hurt?
I think social media plays a huge impact, both in obviously in personal injury and family law and in criminal law. You need to be so careful about what you put on Facebook. I've had plenty of cases where infidelity, where inappropriate behavior, watching the children, drinking, all those kind of things have come out through Facebook messages. And our evidence code allows Facebook messages to come in pretty easily. So you have to be careful. I always admonish my clients to keep everything off of social media.
Right.
Go back and really think about what you've done.
Yeah, good or bad, just keep it off.
Exactly.
And I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but what the heck is TikTok? And does that play into it too now? I mean, I see people drinking and such and all of that. So I guess that lumps into it, huh?
Absolutely. Are people doing strange things like driving in the car and filming themselves? And you can see a child in the back seat. I mean, that's not going to be something a judge is going to appreciate.
Goodness. Well, we also have a question from Richmond, and he would like to know, can parties settle property division and child custody issues out of court, or does the judge have to sort of decide those things?
Oh, absolutely. If you can come to an agreement, the judges will accept it unless you're doing some kind of agreement that's illegal in some way or not permitted by the law. But the way you divide your property, the way you divide pretty much anything is open to negotiation and agreement.
And
I mean,
Reed,
it truly is a contract. I mean, even marriage is a contract. So you're dealing with, if like Holly said it perfect. I mean, if it's not illegal, if it's an illegal aspect, then a contract is void anyway. But you can contract for essentially anything. And so if the parties can agree on property and custody and all of that, then that certainly speeds up the process. It can help the battle and probably will lead to where you won't have a situation where you have a trial or a hearing or anything like that, where the judge will just approve it. So, but I would also say most times it's better to have the attorneys talk about that than the two parties. Because usually the parties are so emotionally invested, it turns into, well, we're going to talk about property, then all of a sudden you're fighting about why you're getting a divorce to begin with. So let the two attorneys discuss what you want and don't want, and come to an agreement in that way.
good advice, Reed, for sure. And Reed and Holly will be back to take more of your questions. Again, our topic, love and the law. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stick around. You're watching News 12 Law Call. Well, thanks so much to Holly Chapman for appearing on behalf of Davis, Chapman, and Wilder, LLC. They're located on the 1100 block of Laney Walker Boulevard in downtown Augusta. You could reach them via the web at dcwattorneys.com, or in the morning, certainly give her a quick call at 706-200-1578. And Reed appears on behalf of the many attorneys within the Hawk Law Group. Best way to reach them, just dial all fours with a 706 area code. There are 5 offices to serve you, including the newest one, which will be opening in Macon in the next few weeks, online, hawklawgroup.com. And we're going to continue with our topic, which is love and the law. And Holly, I always like to put family practice attorneys on the spot. Is there anything over the last several years that has stuck out to you as perhaps a bit of an odd request from a husband or a wife in terms of property, or where they've tried to negotiate it and you just kind of scratched your head a little bit?
I would say that it happens so frequently, I'm not sure that I have one particular good story. But you would find, I mean, in a divorce, people are so angry so frequently that they will fight over the strangest things that you can imagine, something that I'm sure has been packed away in their house and they haven't looked at in 4 years, but now, they both desperately need it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I mean, I've heard all kind of stories from family law attorneys with, I mean, insignificant things that they're fighting, things that aren't valuable at all, and then huge things that are valuable they're not fighting over. So I can imagine that is it's abnormal for you, Neil, but it's very normal for Holly to hear.
right.
Absolutely. Well, good for Holly for helping out in that. A lot of attorneys start out, I was mentioning to her off the air, in that type of area of specialization, and then go to something else. So it's certainly a passion, I'm guessing, right, Holly?
I do like to help people, and this is a time when people really need help.
Oh, sure. Well, hopefully you can help out Wynn, who has an email question for you. And Wynn wants to know, if you inherit property from your family during the marriage, does the other spouse get half of the inherited property in a divorce?
That's a good question. Typically, inherited property is not considered marital property, so you can keep it separate and that it would not be divisible. But you have to be careful to not mingle it in with your marital life, because it can kind of shift from inherited property to marital property if you if it's money that you received and then you put it in your joint bank account and you all use it for normal purposes, then you might lose your separate claim to it.
Or,
Sure.
and I've had a friend of mine had this situation where there was a family property, but the spouse was actually the one, working on the property, dividing the property and selling off the property, or building homes to sell, that kind of thing. I would imagine that kind of situation would shift it into joint property. Would that be correct?
Very likely. It's really a decision for the judge to make. So it always has lots of factors.
Right, sure.
Holly, you often hear about famous movie stars or athletes that have prenuptial agreements with their spouses. Do they occur in the CSRA? And is that something that if you bring that in front of a judge, is it enforceable? That's what Maisha would like to know.
Well, in my practice, seeing prenuptial agreements are pretty rare. So I would not say that they're common around here, but that doesn't mean they're not enforceable. So if it's kind of, again, a contract issue, if it's valid, then sure, it could be enforceable.
Yeah, and with those, Neil, you got it's the same, like Holly's saying, it's the same situation. The prenuptial agreement may list a lot of factors of something that can and cannot be done. Well, if you have a prenuptial agreement and you, as the person who owns the prenuptial agreement, doesn't follow the rules, and maybe infidelity is part of it, and you cheat on a spouse, well, the prenup's essentially gone because you've broken the contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's just, I guess it's much like any type of deal that you would sign, even a business arrangement. It's sort of the four corners of the contract.
Sure, absolutely.
Right.
What it says, yeah. Hey, before we scoot, real quick, last question. Would a custody order change if one parent tests positive for coronavirus or is considered a high risk?
Again, we're looking at a lot of different factors and who your judge is, but you could potentially have an emergency hearing if there were a real concern. But most likely what would happen if someone tested positive, then the other party would just take the children for that period of time.
Excellent. Well, we'll have to leave it there. And we hope that all of our viewers had a great day with their respective sweeties. Loving the law, always a special subject, affects all of us with our families. Thanks to both of you for being part of the program.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on and saving me.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back again next Sunday night. Have a great week ahead.